What's your name?
Paul Graham.
What what branch of force were you in?
I was in the Army and then Army Reserves.
What were your dates of service?
August of '89 until 2014. I enlisted into the Army. I was in the delayed entry program March of '89, then I left August of '89.
And why did you join?
My senior year of high school, my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and so I know we didn't have the money to go to college, and so that's why I enlisted into the Army and wanted to serve my country, and that was the best way I thought that I could do it. I chose the Army because they seemed like they were that was the best fit for me. They had a lot of schooling that I could get to that interests me.
How, how old were you?
I was 18.
Did you recall your first day in service?
Yes. I went from Omaha, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and then I did my training at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Tell me about your boot camp training experience.
I was in the infantry, and we did a lot of training just on basic soldiering, and then getting to the schooling of it. You did a lot of road marching, a lot of weapons qualifications, went out and did some bivouacs, going out into the field and living out in the field for a little bit, and then doing maneuvers out in the field, learning how to do all that stuff.
How did you get through it?
Support from family, friends.
What type of work did you perform while in the service?
I was in the infantry, which is the ground troops that get sent into a situation like if there's a war that goes on, the ground troops usually get sent into it and decipher what's going on with it.
What did they teach you in the service?
When I was in the active Army, I was in the infantry, so they taught me how to be a basic soldier, how to survive out in the field, how to survive when I was by myself with a group.
Where did you serve? Which division, which unit, which ship, in as much detail as possible?
I was, after I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, I was stationed over in Hawaii at the 25th Infantry. I was in the 427 Wolfhounds. While I was there, I did a rotation to Korea for about 45 days doing an exercise over there called Team Spirit. I was involved with the Gulf War, and then I came back for about a year. Then I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I was there for about year and a half, 2 years, and then I got out of the active Army and did the job that I'm doing now. And then in 1997, I joined the Army Reserves and was stationed out of Omaha, the 561st Regional Support Group. And I was there, and I changed my job title to logistics. So I did logistics training, and then I've been in Omaha. I was there in 2004, 2005. I was deployed over to Iraq. I started out in an automation section where we did a bunch of running the computer lines at the base we were at, Al Asad Air Force Base over in Iraq, and we did the computer lines, they're called Nipper and Sipper lines, the secured internet and the regular internet. And then after that, they asked for volunteers to be on gun trucks. And then I ended up being on a gun truck, being in charge of about 40 some people over there. And we did missions out to Jordan to pick up fuel and supplies and bring them back into the middle of Iraq where I was stationed at Al Asad. And then it got dispersed from there. And then in 2009, 2010, I was deployed back to Iraq to Camp Victory, which is in Baghdad. There I was in charge of force protection on the base there for like all of the dining facilities and the PX and things like that. And so I was there for a year, or for about 9 months, and then I came back to the United States here, and then I went to Fort Riley, Kansas. I was in a unit there for about 3 years, and then I retired from the Army Reserves.
Did you see combat?
Yes.
Tell me about the war, of the war. Did you know where you were most of the time?
Yes. I was the first time in 0405. I was in Al Assad, which was Saddam Hussein's Top Gun Air Base. And that's where all of his top pilots were and stuff. It was kind of in the middle of Iraq. And then 2009, 2010, I was at Camp Victory, which is in Baghdad, and did force protection measures there.
What did you believe at that time was at stake in the war?
Well, when I was in the Gulf War, it was to liberate Kuwait, and we did that. And then once we liberated Kuwait, then we got out of there. And then in Iraq, it was Saddam was, people were having problems with Saddam being a dictator, and so we were going in there to basically give the people of Iraq more freedoms that we thought that they wanted.
How did you feel about the enemy that you were fighting? How did you feel about them now?
I had no problems with the enemy. I mean, it was sometimes you didn't know who the enemy was because they were all, sometimes they would be doing the same things as everybody else was doing, and sometimes the enemy they would try to recruit other people to come in, and they'd go after their families if they saw the Americans talking to them and ask them what we were talking about and stuff, and then they would try to use their families against them. When we were doing gun truck missions, we wouldn't let anybody into our convoys, and then we had rules of engagement that we had to use if they tried to get into our convoys, and then so we didn't know at the time, if they were trying to run into us use a VBIED, which is a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device that would try to blow us up, or putting IEDs on the side of the road that would try to blow up our convoys from bringing the fuel or the water or supplies back to where we were going. So.
Did you write home often? Did you describe what you were actually experienced in the letter?
When I was in the Gulf War, I would write home. I would write, or else I'd go stand in line to use the phone. And the phones weren't the greatest at the time, so we would only be on it for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes they get cut off, and then there'd be a big lull in the when you're talking. So I would talk, and then there'd be a hesitation, and then they would hear me, and then because sometimes you would talk over each other. When I was in the Iraq wars, they had phone systems for us, so we could go and buy a phone card that we could go in and use this system that they had set up. But then again, you had to stand in lines, and sometimes we only had a certain amount of time that we could do this, and then we had to go and do our mission. And then it went to you could instant message over like Yahoo or something. And then the last time I was there, they had Skype, where you could Skype with your family, and so that was really good, very good for morale.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
In the Gulf War, it was I relied on my training. The only thing that really bothered me over there was the fact that they had the use of chemical agents, chemical gases that they could fire at us, and then we'd have to go in to put our gas mask on and things like that. One situation, we were supposed to go over and do some training at a site that they had set up. It's kind of like a mock city. And we ended up canceling the training that day because we had guys that were out on detail doing stuff. And so we were sitting in our tent areas, and we heard the Patriot missiles going off. Anytime the Patriot missiles would go off, they would shoot down to a Scud would be a shot from like Saddam or from Iraq or something that they would shoot, and then the Patriot missiles would go and intercept them and blow them up. Well, at the time we were supposed to be walking across this open field was when this intercept happened, and there was a bunch of debris that was falling out there. So I thought that was, kind of, it's kind of a wake up for us that, you know, we weren't out there and stuff. So then once that happened, we always had to put our gas mask on and make sure that there's no chemical agents that were in the scuds and stuff. In Iraq in 04, 05, I was involved with 2 IED explosions, not direct hits. One was behind me, and the other, another convoy, it was in front of us, and felt the concussion from them. And then having to drive around as a gun truck and take over the front gun truck because it was disabled, and it was kind of like it had an overpass, and then we went past a row of garages with a bunch of people hanging out around them. And then there was a school and a mosque, and I can remember people that were just pointing and laughing at us, you know, just kind of pointing at us, and you know. And I ended up everything kind of flashed in front of me, and I remember getting out of my vehicle, and I was in slow motion. I was just trying to move, and then I got out, and I remember my gunner was on top, and he was spinning around saying, what do we do? And I remember saying, if anybody shows a gun, you know, points a gun at us, you got to shoot them. So and then I kind of came back out of it, and then I jumped back in the vehicles. That was the most safest area. And so then we called for backup, and then we had a backup that arrived there, and we towed our vehicle back into a safe area, and then fixed it up, and then we left the next day. So, and then 2009, 2010, I was on the base, and so we would always have incoming rounds that would come in and land, and we'd have to go. I was on a team that would have to go and assess the damage and get the proper people there to help clean it up. You know, if they hit a T-wall, if they hit what they call a CHU, which is a containerized housing unit, we'd have to get those people in there to assist. And if there's anybody that got injured, we would have to assist with that. So,
all right. How did you get promoted?
I just doing the things I needed to do to get promoted. I started out as a E2 when I first came in, and then I went all the way up to E8. I retired as an E8 Master Sergeant.
What was the food like?
When I was deployed, the food was okay. I can't really complain about it. They would have the mess hall would have a surf and turf on a Friday night where they would have some type of a steak, and then they would have lobster tail, they would have crab legs, and what they would do is they would cut the crab legs in half so you didn't have to break them and stuff, and we could eat them like that. They had ice cream, they had cheese, you name it. You could get really out of shape and fat if you didn't work out when you were there. The food wasn't bad at all. Now, if you were out in the field and you had to eat MREs or T rations or something, then, you know, that's one of the things. And I brought some MREs here we can look at here in a little bit too.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
Oh yeah, I was, you know, in the Gulf War, you didn't know what Saddam had for chemical agents. If he was going to shoot them out of the scuds, that you would have some type of, they talk about mustard gas, they talk about blister agent. You know, that was all the stuff that gets on you, and that just eats your skin away. You know, if it gets into your lungs, it's not good for you. When I was doing gun trucks, the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, were there. They had 6-lane highways, just like we have the Interstate 80 out here. They had 6-lane highways that would run through Iraq, and we would travel in them. You always have to worry about going underneath an overpass, about them being on top and dropping, you know, grenades or dropping something off into your turret of your vehicle and blowing it up, or setting up an IED on the side of the road, and then they would remote detonate it from the desert, and then it would blow up and cause casualties for us. And then the last time I was deployed, it was being on the base and having rounds that were being shot in at us to try to, you know, disrupt us and kill us and get us out of there.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
I'd pray a lot. You know, I like to talk to my family. I would talk to my wife whenever I could. That made things go a lot better, being able to communicate with family back home. I couldn't tell her what was going on when things would happen, but she could tell, and she would just ask if everything was okay, and then I'd say yes or no or whatever. But we couldn't get into it when we were talking because of, you know, the security of the mission and things like that.
How did people,
Entertain?
entertain yourself?
We had a place that was called the MWR. It's where you can go and watch movies, you can go and use the phone, you can play pool, you could play games, video games. I mean, they had this thing set up to where you could go there and just kind of unwind if you needed to. Sometimes you can go eat food, or you can go and work out. That's one of the things I like to do is work out over there. I ran in some 5K races. I did a lot of weightlifting and things like that at the gym, just to kind of relieve the stress that we were under. What did I do on leave? I came back to the States. I didn't have leave when I was in the Gulf War. When I was in Iraq, the first time I came home, and we didn't tell our daughter that I was coming home, so I surprised her when I got back. The 2009, 2010, when I came home, my son was just over a year, I think, and he was really into balls, and so I made sure I grabbed some like spongy balls when I got off the plane, and I gave those to him, and he came right to me then. So I came home on leave for 2 weeks, the 2 times I was in Iraq. Do you recall any particular humorous or unusual events? When I was over in Iraq, they would have the MWR would bring in like celebrities, and one group they brought in Jesse James, I think she's a country singer. Carlos Mencia was in, and Kid Rock all came in. They performed back to back. Very, very good. A lot of people loved it. They brought in the Minnesota Viking cheerleaders were there and performed. Zach Brown Band was there. We listened to them. Did a great job. So they did a lot of things for us. And then they brought in Tostitos had a football like for the Fiesta Bowl, and they brought in like Tommy Frazier was there, T. Martin, Rocket Ismail, Brian Bosworth, a bunch of pro and college players. Barry Schlitzer was there, and I believe it was Terry, one of the Bowdens was there, and they had played a game of flag football with our group of guys, soldiers that were deployed that won the league that they were in during the time. So they split up the teams and they played flag football against each other. So that was kind of cool watching that.
Did you have photographs from your time in the service?
I did. I took photos when I was in Kuwait and the Gulf War. I took photos of the oil well fires that they set, and just of the destruction that happened in Kuwait City there.
Did you make any close friendship while in the service?
Oh yeah, there's everybody I was deployed with is always. I mean, you put your life in their hands, and so everybody needs to trust everybody, and that's I think what happened when we were on the gun trucks and even when we were on the bases and stuff. And so you trust everybody that you're there with, so that they'll do their job, and I'm still friends with them today.
Did you continue any of the relationships?
Yes, yep. Still visit, email, talk on Facebook.
Did you keep a personal diary?
I started to until I got too busy, and then I couldn't write in it all the time. So bits and pieces I did.
Did you recall the day your service ended?
Yep, it was 2014, I believe May of 2014.
Where were you?
I was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas. I was in a unit that would deploy troops out of like Fort Bliss, Texas, Fort Hood, Texas. And so I was just a stateside guy then.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterwards?
Just went back to work, kind of debriefed, and then took some time off, and then went back to work.
Did you work or go to school?
When I graduated high school, I went straight into the military. I ended up getting the GI Bill, and then when I came out of the active Army, I became a police officer and went to the training center out of Grand Island. And then I didn't feel that I was going to go to college at that time, so I ended up using my GI Bill for on-the-job training to get a little bit more pay. So I ended up doing that. And then when I deployed in Iraq, I ended up getting the 9/11 bill that I ended up giving to my wife to use to get her her bachelor's and master's in nursing.
Did you join a veteran organization?
I'm in the VFW. I'm the chaplain in the VFW. Reunions?
Yeah.
Not yet. We haven't really had any reunions yet.
All right. Did your military experience influence you thinking about your war, or about the military in general?
No, my training in the active Army as infantry and my training as a police officer was used in the war, because I was trained in logistics to do like supply, make sure everything was accounted for, and they ended up using my training that I had as an infantry and as an active Army, and then being a police officer to do gun truck missions and to do force protection.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Sure, I can talk more about the going to the Gulf War. When I was when I left basic training, I went to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. When I was in Hawaii, there was a thing that was called the Duty Ready Force Cycle 1 that they had. We were watching what was going on in the Pacific, like in the Philippines was acting up at the time. There was maps of the Philippines in our day room, and I was kind of nervous about that because I was just coming out of basic, so I didn't have a lot of experience. So luckily nothing happened, and then we went into a training cycle. I took my training serious. I trained hard to know how to do certain things, and then we did training before the Gulf War happened, and I was chosen to, as one of the platoons chosen to go over to the Gulf War. We trained hard. I wasn't really concerned about anything. Wasn't really nervous other than what Saddam had as for nuclear and gas and things like that they could shoot at us. So, having taking the training seriously really helped me get to the point where I am now, and understanding how to do certain things. So.
All right.